Dave?
Huh. You're gonna go shower? Okay, you can shut the TV off. Hey, Jack. Can you hear me?
I can.
Can you hear me? Sorry about that. I got distracted. So, all right. So I guess I can start, huh?
You can.
I suppose. Okay. Well, actually, it says live in 11 minutes and 30 seconds.
So you're live now.
I'm live now. Okay. All right. So we are on. I didn't realize that. I apologize for that. Well, welcome everybody to who is viewing online or live streaming through Facebook or YouTube. It is an honor for me to be here. And first and foremost, I need to thank Tony Lynch for adding me to this lineup of really terrific inspirational speakers and workshop presenters, of which Jenny Diltz is one of them. And Jenny, I need to thank Jenny personally for hooking me up with Tony and allowing me to be a part of this inspirational event. And I suppose I should probably tell you guys a little bit about me before I begin the actual presentation. I am a licensed master social worker. I worked as an addictions professional for 27 years for the state of New York. I was a clinical supervisor and I did direct practice as well. I retired in 2012. I retired, I use that in quotations because I retired to a whole different set of activities that I am passionate about. I did not, obviously, the path of working in the field of thanatology and doing bereavement support wasn't something that I had set out to do, but as I have understood in my life, we don't have control over the paths that open up for us. We just have to have faith that the path that opens for us is the one that we were meant to take and to lead a purpose-driven life through. And we'll get and I don't think anybody I've talked to who have gotten into the field of death and dying have gotten into it through professional choice. I think it's usually been personal circumstance that has driven us there. And I will get to the background in terms of how I began to find a purpose-driven life and embrace meaning through my own challenges with loss. Since I've retired in 2012, and again, I use that very, very loosely, I have embraced teaching at Utica University. I'm an adjunct professor of psychology and psychology child life. One of my regular course offerings that I teach is death, dying, and bereavement. I've been a podcast guest on numerous shows talking about various areas of grief, particularly transformation from through life-altering challenges, which is really one of the things I'm passionate about talking to people about. And I've written for Medium. I've been a HuffPost contributor, writing on topics related from grief, addiction, and spirituality. And I recently co-authored a book last year with Reverend Patty Farino called When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister, which talks in part about the spiritually transformative experience that Reverend Patty guided me through that helped me find peace after the most catastrophic loss of my life. So that is a background. At the end of the presentation, I will have slides with my contact information. I'm also here on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. My son calls me the world's oldest millennial. So I'm pretty much all over the place on social media. So you can find me as well as find me in through email and websites. So I guess with that, we ought to begin. So let's see how we can. And also, I also have to thank Josh and Nathan. They've done just a terrific job trying to get all this put together in such a short period of time. They've been great with support. They've been great with running me through StreamYard, answering my questions. Even if they were obvious questions, they would ask them, they would answer them. So I really appreciate what they've done behind the scenes. So, and I've learned in my life that you're always good to the technical staff. You never abuse the technical staff, because they're the reasons that technology works. So, and you guys have been great. So I just want to give you guys a specific shout out. So with that, this is going to be about an hour presentation. I will take questions through the presentation. In fact, I may even stop at parts just to entertain questions and see if there's any comments or questions that I can answer as we go along. I know there is not a workshop scheduled after. I believe the next workshop is with Sherry Dunleavy at 10 a.m. And Sherry, I can say from experience, is one of the most inspirational people you will find, and her workshop will be worth going to. And I think, Jenny, I'm going to be in your workshop today at 12. Am I correct? At 12. And Jenny is another person whose workshop you need to attend, not just because I'm going to be there, but you need to attend it because Jenny has a lot to offer. And she has, through her own challenges, has really, really helped a lot of individuals in the field in coaching and doing bereavement support. And Jenny and Sherry are just one of many individuals who have found their path through transcending life-altering challenges. So, okay, with that, let's see. And hopefully Josh and Nathan are by in case I can't share this too well. Let's see what goes. Share slides. There we go. So I just hit. Okay, what happened? My slides didn't go up. Oh, wait, here they go. Ah, nope, that's the wrong, there we go. Let's do this again. Should be, there we go. Perfect. All right. Title of my presentation is Pieces of Me, a tool to integrate grief and transform relationships with our deceased loved ones. So without further ado, and I'm a teacher, so there's going to be teaching points at the end and there's going to be objectives. There's only going to be a couple, but there's going to be objectives. So, okay, why isn't, oh, there we go. Next slide. Okay. Purpose of the workshop will be to introduce participants to a technique that can promote movement through and integration of grief by embodying or incorporating the best qualities of our transitioned loved ones into our life narrative. And we're going to also discuss how incorporating those qualities can facilitate continued bonds and transformation of relationships with our transitioned loved ones. Now, I use the term transition to refer to an individual who has left this physical world and has transitioned to a new existence. But it's however your clients, it's however you conceptualize our physical passing, whether it's passed away, passed on, walked on, it's whatever language that you're comfortable with and that your clients are comfortable with. For me, it's transition. That's the term that I've learned to become comfortable with. Okay, let's see if we can do the next slide. There we go. All right, but first, some background. I have to say, the thing I like about Microsoft PowerPoint is they have like a smart slide feature, so you can hit design ideas and they just come up with random slides that I think they probably get from the internet. So this is the best I could do with a literal definition of background. So hopefully you guys like purple and blue. So, okay. Yeah, I got to remember to keep doing it this way. Okay. Here is the background. This is where this all began for me. Okay. This is my daughter, Jeannine Marie Roberts. Jeannine was born April 27th, 1984, and she transitioned from her earthly existence on March 1st, 2003, at the age of 18. Now, Jeannine transitioned approximately 10 months after giving birth to her only child, and my first granddaughter, Brianna, who, as an aside, is going to be 20 years old today, or 20 years old on Monday. And my wife, Sherry, and I are taking her out for her birthday today at about, we're going to go probably 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. We're going to take her out for her birthday today. And we're taking her to a nice place. So I told her, I said, just run up the bill. It's your 20th birthday. It's only going to come up once. So she will do that. Just to give you a little bit of a timeline first. I graduated with an MSW, Master's in Social Work, from the University of Albany and I got my degree conferred May 19th, 2000 and in 2002. A week later, Jeannine was diagnosed with a very rare and aggressive connective muscle tissue cancer called alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma. This was May 26th. My granddaughter, Brianna, was born May 2nd. So just this timeline, I think, demonstrates the microcosm of life is that we can experience many different emotions at different times, and especially when we least expect it. And that, it's just, I went from the joy of being a grandfather for the first time to getting my graduate degree to now being involved with an adult child who had a terminal illness, a stage 4 tumor, and the oncologist that we had spoken with and at Dana-Farber in Boston, which is one of the best pediatric oncology units in the country, and particularly for childhood sarcomas, they basically told us that there was absolutely no potential for a cure for her disease, that we had to do aggressive chemotherapy until a cure could be found, with the hope that it would go into remission, but it never did. It was an 80% remission, and then shortly in January of 2002, her cancer remetastasized. It was fully involved, her bones, lymph node, and she transitioned with hospice services at 12:30 in the morning on March 1st, 2003. And that set me on a path that I never thought I would ever be on as a parent. I had been a therapist. I had helped people deal with trauma, I thought, very effectively. I even did some grief work with individuals, and I had experienced other losses before, many losses before. But this one put me in a world that was terrifying, that was uncertain. And at the age of 47, I wasn't worried about having a midlife crisis. I was worried about, how am I going to re-engage in a world with meaning? How was I going to re-engage in a world with meaning without the physical presence of my daughter? And that required looking at a variety of different assumptions about how I thought the world operated, and changing those assumptions, deciding what's going to let go, what's going to stay, what assumptions no longer serve me, and how was I going to move through what had happened. And part of what I learned, and what I discovered, was that in order to be able to effectively move through grief for me, I had to continue to honor the relationship and realize that my daughter was still going to be my daughter, no matter where she was residing in this, whatever dimension she was residing in, and that I needed to basically learn how to transform that relationship and continue the relationship with her in order to move through grief. And this is what Pieces of Me is about. I have to do a shout out, and again, I'll be doing a actual talk at 4 o'clock tomorrow, Eastern Standard Time, and I'll go more into the background, because there's more to the story with Jeannine. There's a lot to this that for time purposes, I will save until my talk tomorrow. And the other thing that I will say is, I would not have been able to embrace this perspective without the guidance of Reverend Patty Farina. There's no way I would have. And we met through pure serendipity. And that led to the launching of our book last year, and talking about the experience, about the growth that occurred for both of us as a result of our marathon conversations, and what I learned about integrating science and spirituality. But I have to give credit to Patty, because she's the one that introduced me to all of this and set this groundwork where I could develop a technique, or be passionate about a technique that I think can help us work through grief by maintaining the bonds with our loved ones. Okay. All right. I keep forgetting. I got to do this like this. Okay. Just some preliminary concepts to set the stage for the introduction of Pieces of Me. I would like to explore these concepts. One is continued bonds. This was a concept that was developed in the early 90s by a gentleman by the name of Dennis Class, who is a professor emeritus at Webster University, has a PhD in theology, and wrote a really outstanding book called The Spiritual Lives of Bereaved Parents, which I reference to my students today, because even though he was never a bereaved parent himself, he did a lot of consultation work for the Bereaved Parents of the USA and the Compassionate Friends of the USA, and through the Compassionate Friends Incorporated, and through his observations, he came up with kind of a model, for lack of a better term to put this, of how bereaved parents grieve, that was not stage-based, that was very that resonated with me, and particularly the last part of that model is maintaining continued connections with our loved ones and communities that support it. Linking objects, and we'll talk more about that as well too, and also the process of integration in terms of, and this is going to be what the process of integration means to me. Again, the process of integration can mean different things for different people, but I want to share what that meant for me and how all of these concepts set the stage for me for pieces of me and developing this specific technique. Okay. Can everybody still hear me? We're good? Perfect. I got a thumbs up from Jenny, so I'm good. Your Jenny's doing quality control today too. So if I mess up or anything, I probably get a full report at the end, right? Okay, good. Chicken Fox can hear me too. That's cool. All right, good. All is well when technology is working. Hey, I keep forgetting. I got to keep doing this. All right, continued bonds. This was a theory, as I mentioned, that was developed by Dennis Klaus, and it was initially discussed in his book, Continued Bonds, New Understanding of Grief, which was co-edited with Phyllis Silverman and Stephen Nickman. And I think Klaus has done some other co-editing work with Phyllis Silverman as well, too. Their work questioned linear models of grief that were supposed to lead to things like acceptance, detachment, and detachment from the pain of our loss, and then moving on, moving on with our lives, which, as we know, does not happen. Grief is not a linear experience. It is very circular. We can experience the raw pain of grief or sadness or yearning for our loved ones. It doesn't matter if it's been 5 years, 2 years, 2 months, 20 years. We can experience that at any time based on what's going on at the present moment. What I have found that over time, I have learned to expect it, I have learned to manage it, and I have learned to grow and to discern teachings from my good moments and my not so good moments. And everything is in service. I've learned that everything is in service to us. Okay. Good or bad. And I learned that later in grief. In early grief, it was all about survival, but in later grief, I began to, as I embraced different perspectives, began to look at things differently. And also, these linear models also viewed behaviors that promoted a continued bond with deceased loved ones as pathological. And as you know, in some circles of society, the emphasis was on helping people grieve for a predetermined period of time. And if it was anything longer than a year, grief after that was deemed as pathological. But as we know, and as the grief coaches out there and the workers know, and from my own experience, the second year is in many cases worse than the first year because the reality of our loss sets in the second year. The first year is kind of a surreal experience. We kind of think, well, maybe this is all a dream. Maybe my life is going to be given back to me. But for me, it was year one and day one after Jeannine transitioned that I realized that this was going to be my life moving forward, that I would need to learn how to re-engage without her physical presence. So Klaus and his colleagues, they disagreed with this notion, and they suggested a paradigm, which you'll find in the Spiritual Lives of Bereaved Parents, that where it is normal for the bereaved to continue their bond with the deceased. What I have learned, that we get through our grief, through remembering, through connecting to memory, through embodying the essence, the positive qualities of our loved ones, incorporating those into our life narrative, so that when I tell people that what you see with me, you see with my daughter, because we're a package deal, the best parts of her, the best parts of me. And what research appears to have demonstrated is that continued bonds have allowed individuals to be able to work through grief, to begin to accept the fact that their lives are going to be different, and in spite of that, commit to re-engaging in a purpose-driven and meaningful life with service in honor of and with their loved ones to others. Okay. This was all retrieved, and I know you can't see that. You'll see the hyperlink. It's What's Your Grief? Okay. Yeah, got to get to this. Okay. And this is just a meme or that I found online. We don't leave deceased loved ones behind, rather we carry them with us throughout our lives. Okay. And it's, can you stay close? 19 years later, I talk to my daughter every day. I do that. And nobody has accused me yet of being pathological for doing that, nor would I accuse anybody of being pathological, because again, it's how we keep the relationship alive. And in early grief, amidst all the shock, the disorientation, and amidst the cognitive work of trying to figure out what kind of a world do we want to live in again, um, we what we do, whether it's visit the cemetery, make a donation in honor of our loved one's name, what we're talking to our loved ones, creating a shrine or a memorial, with their favorite things, keeping a favorite item that we could smell every day, so that we sense their odors, we sense who they are when they were alive. These are all ways that we maintain the relationship, um, and we do that as part, it simultaneously with just our will to try to survive the worst thing that's ever happened to us. And by the way, just because the worst thing that happened to me is the death of my child doesn't mean I can't meet anybody at their worst loss. Because what is my worst loss, maybe somebody else's worst loss, maybe the loss of a parent, um, the loss of a spouse, it could be the loss of a pet. So we will meet people at their worst loss, and there isn't any. I don't take any scores. What's your worst loss? What has had the most impact on your life at this point? That's where we go, and hopefully, I can use my experiences to meet those individuals where they're at. Okay. Oh, good. We're doing good. All right. Linking objects. Um, And of course, I have a story around this too, for myself with my daughter. But linking objects. Okay, I keep forgetting I got to do it this way. All right. Linking objects are any objects that facilitate continued bonds with our transitioned loved ones. They connect us to memories of our time with those on Earth, and can, in some cases, allow us to relive those memories as if they are happening in real time. The linking object can be anything big or small. Now, in the context of a support group setting, a linking object qualifies if you can get it through the door. Um, and there's a story behind that. I have a good friend of mine. I used to co-facilitate a hospice bereavement support group, and before I started teaming up with her, she told me about a group that she had facilitated. And one of the activities that they will do is have a photograph night. They'll bring in a photograph of their loved one, to see their transition loved one, and they will share stories about that photograph, why that photograph was meaningful, why they chose that, what was the story behind that. And we all know how therapeutic storytelling is to help individuals eventually, and after numerous tellings of that story, begin to wrap their head around the reality of loss. And wrapping their head around the reality of loss does not mean that there is closure to the loss. It means that they are taking steps towards accepting, what their world is like now, without their loved one. And one woman brought in a pasta machine, and so the group asked, "Well, why did you?" So tell us about the pasta machine. Her and her husband, her husband had transitioned, they said that they solved problems. They talked about the kids. They talked about their dreams. And all that they did this while they made homemade pasta. So she brought in the pasta machine, and there were stories around that. There was a whole story, and you can see her husband. My friend told me this, because you could see her husband come alive through that story. They came alive through it was just like she was experiencing that almost in real time. Okay. This is my linking object to Jeannine, and I have to share this story. And I think and this is a big piece with the process of integration, is being able to I think, identify this. This was an object that I found, or that found me 6 months after Jeannine transitioned. And this is just a simple car fan. Okay, it's a car fan deodorizer. That it's a clip-on, and it makes your car smell real pretty, when you turn the vent on. And my car at the time was a 1993 Jeep Cherokee, and no one ever would accuse me of that car of smelling pretty. Okay, there was a lot of stuff in there. So my daughter at 14, in her inevitable blunt manner, and she was about as subtle as a trumpet solo, said to me, she goes, "Dad, your Jeep stinks." I said, "Okay, so what are we going to do about it?" She goes, "Well, I'm going to take you out and I'm going to buy you a car deodorizer." So we went to a local shop. It was Pep Boys. And I can recall, so every time I look at this fan, which I keep right on my desk, every time I look at this, I can recall that it was a summer day, that Jeannine was dressed in a summer outfit. I was dressed in shorts and a shirt. Um, and we went to a place called Pep Boys. The person who waited on us was probably 17, 18 years old, maybe a little younger. Um, and Jeannine picked out this, I think it was kind of like a peppermint smelling fan. I will give you two guesses who paid for the fan. It was me. She just said that to get me out the door. Okay. But it is an object as small as a $2 fan, um, was something that brought up that story. And every time I talk about that story, it's almost like I'm living in two worlds at the same time. I'm in the present world and I'm in a parallel universe where I can see these events unfolding. So that's how vivid linking objects are to helping us connect to our loved ones and embody the essence of our loved ones. Okay. And the other thing, Marty McNabb, I believe at 4 o'clock today, is doing a really, really cool workshop around this concept. And I had a chance I wanted to sit in on Marty's workshop, but I couldn't. So basically, we did a podcast interview around that object. And for those of you who are friends with me on Facebook, Marty shared and tagged the link. And I think she shared it in the Global Grief Conference group as well, too, if you want to hear more about this. Oh, it's 4 p.m. my time. Thank you very much for that. 2 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Thank you, Josh and Nathan, for that. Okay. The process of integration. And again, this is what I needed to do for me to begin to learn to embody the best pieces of my daughter and make them the best pieces of me. Experiencing the raw pain of grief. I had to basically wallow in the muck of my own grief and not try to outrun it, not try to suppress it. I needed to experience the pain at its fullest. And in early grief, my pain taught me that I had the will to survive and to continue to move on. In later grief, I began to learn that the negative experiences such as sadness, and anger that will return, and basically the desire to isolate, has its own gifts or positive qualities or positive outcomes that can help us learn as well too. Deciding to re-engage in life in honor of and with our transitioned loved ones. Every one of us here will have kind of like an aha moment when we decide that we are now going to live a life with purpose. Deciding that doesn't mean that the process is not gradual for getting there. Okay. For me, it was about 3 years into my grief that I decided to re-engage in a life with purpose. And it was a process. I did what a lot of other bereaved parents had modeled for me. I, started to write about my grief. I started to do workshops and presentations. My existence was, to make sure my daughter was not forgotten and to do work in honor of her. And then there came to a point where I stated my intention to the universe to want more. And that's where Patty Farino came in and again introduced me to some different perspectives that allowed me to get to the place that I'm at now, 19 plus years later. Transforming our relationships by continuing the bonds with our loved ones in spirit. Linking objects is one way to do that. transforming our relationships by incorporating or embodying the best pieces of our loved ones and ourselves, which permanently alters our life narrative after catastrophic loss. If we can if we can be open to embodying those best characteristics of our loved ones, our life narrative is going to change. We will become change, and we will always literally carry our loved ones with us. Not just carrying our grief with us, but we will carry our loved ones with us and complete that process of integration. Okay. Pieces of me, an activity to promote integration. This is what, again, Microsoft PowerPoint came up with for a background. We got puzzle pieces. So apparently they took that literally. Okay, so I'm like a little kid with PowerPoints. Once I discovered what I could do with them, now I'm kind of, my wife thinks I'm obnoxious with them. So, I look at different transitions and other stuff as well, too. What does pieces of me entail? This is something I came up with on my own, and I did put a copyright on it. I mean, I just did the copyright symbol in 2017. But what I'm sharing with you, please, I'm waiving copyright, ownership. You just share it with whomever you think this is going to work with, that whomever you're going to help. Because anything that I put out there, I want others to share. That's part of how we continue the work. That's part of the pay it forward narrative. And we're all in this together as far as what we're trying to do to help individuals throughout challenges. So for me, I'll willingly share any resources that I have, if you find them to be useful. This is a structured, self-directed activity that empowers those who use it to permanently alter their life narratives after catastrophic loss by consciously incorporating the best characteristics or qualities of their transitioned loved ones into themselves. It is a way we can permanently carry the essences of our loved ones in ourselves until our time on earth is done. And in the process, our relationships with those who have transitioned are transformed, allowing us to find peace and clarity. One of the things that, before I show you the activity, one of the things that I try not to do is idealize the relationship I had with my daughter. Trust me, she, as a teenager, any hair that I have remaining or that I've lost has probably been through worry over some of the choices that she made. And there were times that, I would be very frustrated with her. But what I've learned about individuals who've had near-death experiences, have got a glimpse of the afterlife, any type of conflicts or roles that we played in this life don't matter in the afterlife. In the afterlife, it's about pure love. It's about pure light. And so that's the context in which I encourage individuals to embrace this activity, especially with stigmatized loss. If you take a look at the stigmas surrounding loss due to suicide and addiction, there's a lot of negativity. And there's also been a lot of conflicts and worry that have been caused as a result of choices that individuals have made and there's a lot of questions that survivors face as well, too, that we shouldn't have to face, but we do. And in doing this process, where we're taking a look at those positive characteristics of an individual who died as a result of stigmatized loss, what we're doing is we're looking at their essence, and that may allow us to take a look at their entire lives differently if we can focus on that. Because in spirit, none of this matters. In the afterlife, none of this matters. It's all about pure love and light. Okay, so what I want to do is show you the activity. Okay, so these are questions that we can ask ourselves. What qualities or characteristics of your loved one do you admire the most? How can you make these qualities a part of your own life so that you can find meaning and joy amidst the sadness of grief? How can you make these qualities a part of your own life so that you can be of service to others? And how will embodying the characteristics or qualities of your loved ones help you to strengthen your connection to him or her? Okay. I have a Microsoft Word document with all these questions. These are questions that you can, because our goal is to be there for our clients, for individuals requesting grief support services or coaching for the long haul. These are things, these are questions that you can present at any time during your work with the client. You can do it at intervals because with grief being an ever transformational process, the qualities that they identified 3 months earlier may be different than 3 months later. Because and what that does is it honors the ongoing metamorphosis and transformational process of grief. Um, and I can tell you I mean, if you ask me what I was like when Jeannine transitioned at 47 years old, you'd need a search party, a posse, and some really sophisticated information to find that guy because I couldn't tell you who he was. Some days, some weeks, the transformation is so stark, I couldn't even tell you who I was the week before. So you can present these questions over and over and over again. And if you want, for anybody who wants, I'll be more than happy to share those materials with you. All you have to do is email me and I will give you my contact information. There's a slide with that, with my contact information. Okay. Okay, here are some of the common characteristics and traits. These are the ones that I identified, but let me tell you, you can add to this list. So these are things kind of like integrity, sense of humor, honor, caring, sensitive, being sensitive, hardworking, stubborn. Jeannine was the epitome of stubbornness, but that also allowed her to. I saw that later as a really positive trait because she didn't back down from anybody, and she was very clear with setting boundaries about the experiences that she wanted to have in her circle and those that she didn't. And her stubbornness and tough mindedness did this. Loving, willful, willing to help others, playful, intelligent, good hearted, good father, good mother, loves to read. Loves art, loves music. So, I mean, these were things that I came up with. But you can come up with your own list, and in fact, you can collaborate with your clients to have them come up with some. Ask them about what you love about your loved one, what you like about what you love about your loved one, what you admire about him or her the most, and add that to the list. And again, present these over and over again to clients because again, what they identify as positive characteristics may evolve over time because our grief evolves. As long as we commit to doing the work of grief. Okay, the next slide. If I was in a group, this would be an experiential activity that I would give you. I would have you answer all questions on the handout, integrating our grief after the death of our loved ones. For the first question, you can use a common characteristics or trait sheet or produce your own and discuss your thoughts or feelings if you so choose. A question I get is, can this be done with parents who have experienced the death of a child due to pregnancy or newborn death loss? And I say it can be. What I think what would tend to happen is that the qualities you would identify with your child would be those qualities you would have envisioned him or her having had they had continued to, had they had lived. And so, that would be something that I think you can incorporate. You would just have to probably, do that just a little bit differently. It would kind of be those imagined qualities that you think that child would have had. Here's one of the things that, in order for us, I believe, to really begin to utilize pieces of me as a tool to begin to connect to our loved ones, whether it be through linking objects or any other activity, to integrate our grief, we have to really look at honoring the past as our teacher. And there is a lot of emphasis on being in the present, and I get that. And I think it's important, particularly to cultivate mindfulness, to reduce anxiety. But if we choose not to look at the teachings of our past, we tend to, we tend to, it doesn't, for me, enrich our present, because every past decision that we've ever made, I believe, has contributed to what the path we're taking in the present. Every past the path that we took in the path prior to loss, after loss, determines where we are in the present. So looking at our past, I think, can provide inspiration for a very creative present and an inspirational future. And I'm paraphrasing Crow medicine, with Native American Crow medicine, out of the book Jamie Sam's Medicine Cards, where she states, with Crow medicine, honor the past as your teacher, honor the present as your creation, and honor the future as your inspiration. And I mean, Friedrich Nietzsche, I think, had mentioned, and I'm paraphrasing Nietzsche, I think um, if you disown your past, you kind of disregard your existence, because the past makes us who we are in the present. And finally, from Soren Kierkegaard, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. So looking at our past allows us to to live life forward, right, in a forward way, and embrace the process of integration. Okay. All right. Couple of things. This is my contact information. Um, this is my personal email. There's my Utica University email, my website, which will give you links to articles and, just a more extensive bio, and my phone number. I do respond to text message. All you got to do is, you won't be in my contact list, but just let me know who you are, and then I'll put you in my contact list and I will respond. And if you call my phone, it'll go right to voicemail because you're not in my contact list, but just leave a message and I'll get back to you. And finally, some information on the book, When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister. Um, there's the link to the book on Amazon, or you can contact me at bootsyandangel@gmail.com for a signed copy, and we can make arrangements in terms of payment. If you have a Venmo account, we can do Venmo, or we can do some other way to do that. So um, we have been thrilled. We've gotten some excellent reviews from grief educators, from young adults who have read the book, and we're just thrilled that it pretty much, for those of you who want to know my journey very intimately, this book, there's nothing left out on the table. Everything's out on the table. And we want this to get into the hands of as many people as we can, because we think it will help. And that is, I think, it. So I think I can exit full screen now. All right, there we go. Okay. All right, let's see if there are any comments. Okay. So I'll take questions. We've got, I think, a few minutes left. We got about, am I right, Nathan and Josh? We got about at least 5 minutes left or so, 5 or 10 minutes for questions. Now, plenty of time. Okay. All right. So I'll take questions. I'll take any comments, anything that you want to throw at me. Nothing. There's no question I won't answer. I'm an open book. Jenny, go ahead.
Cool. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. And I've learned a lot. Like, even with all of my grief work and learning and experiences, I've learned a lot. So I have a question for you. What is the hardest part about integrating our loved ones into our lives?
And I think that varies for everybody. I think it depends on a lot of different circumstances. I think it depends on the cause of death, the nature of the relationship that the person has had, the history of the relationship prior to death. I think all that plays a role. I think the hardest part of integration is that, for me, is that I think it's almost like, if we integrate our grief, if we integrate the best qualities of our loved one, are we in fact, I think the hardest part is that we have to now kind of take a look at other behaviors that no longer serve us. Do we want to, by integrating, we're saying we're no longer going to play in the energy of guilt. We're no longer going to play in the energy of anger. we're basically going to accept that our loved ones are with us in a different way. And I think a lot of times, um, I think the raw pain of grief and a lot of the normal experience emotions we experience, such as guilt and anger, um, I think may get in the way of that. And I think if we can help individuals understand that no, this is not a way that you're letting go, but you're hanging on by to the memories of your loved ones and to the essence of their loved ones through integration, I think it makes it. But integration involves a change of perspective, Jenny. And you know, change is difficult for anybody, even for those who welcome it. It's a scary prospect because now
Mhm.
you have to give out up behaviors that, though you know weren't serving you well, are still comfortable. And one of the things is also, you know, I kind of look at a quote from The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, one of my favorite books on the afterlife, and he says, "People are afraid of change, but change is it's kind of like something equivalent to eating double fudge frosting on a chocolate cupcake. That once we embrace it, it's sweet, but it's just getting there." That I think is more difficult for individuals. I think it's because they have to let go of behaviors that, though they know will no longer serve them, it's still a part of them. And in a sense, letting go of those behaviors is also a part of grief because they're losing a part of themselves
Mhm.
in the process. And to me, that's the hardest part. For everybody else, it could be different. So,
So how can we embrace change a little bit easier?
um, I think one normalizing the change is difficult, and maybe introducing individuals to change gradually, based on some individuals' histories, and you'll know this working with certain clients. They You may have to introduce them to change slowly. I look at individuals, for example, and I've worked with individuals who have had mental health challenges around schizophrenia and
Mhm.
bipolar disorder. These are individuals that may have a relapse of symptoms because of introducing sudden changes into their lives. So with anybody, and I think with grieving individuals, I think it's the same thing. We introduce them to change gradually. And we also need to be attuned, use our active listening skills to see what aspect of their grief they're willing to change at this point. And our clients will give us a door. Even the most resistive clients will give us a door and they'll say, "Here, I want you to walk through this door." Okay, because this is a door I'm going to open for you. And as long as we walk through that door, we establish a relationship with them and they see that we're willing to meet them where they're at, they become empowered and they will then open more doors or be more receptive to hearing our observations of what we think will be helpful. But it's all about everybody's different and
Mhm.
just using your powers of observation and active listening to simply say, okay, which door are they opening for me? Which aspect of their path are they willing to change at this point?
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Jenny?
It absolutely does.
Okay. And I hope that makes sense to everybody else who's listening too. So, are there any other questions? Anybody? I mean, I don't know if, let's see if there's any other. I don't see any comments with questions. Um, let's see. It doesn't look like there's anything. Um, so I think we're kind of good at this point. I think if there's nothing else, um, for anybody that got up at 6 o'clock in the morning till at Mountain Standard Time or daylight time to listen to my presentation, I thank you. If you got up earlier than that, I double thank you. Um, and Jenny, thanks for being a part of the broadcast today too. You always add good stuff to anything that anybody does, and I'm just honored and grateful that you wanted to be a part of it today. And I'm going to see you at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 12 o'clock your time. So I will definitely be in the room with you and as well too. And I'm looking forward to that as well. And so with that, I wish everybody who listened to my presentation peace. I want to thank Josh and Nathan again. This was seamless. I loved having you know, your comments guiding me. You made it much, much, much easy for me. So with that, I want to thank everybody. Please don't hesitate to get in contact with me. I'm on Facebook, so don't hesitate to friend me and or and I'd love to carry on the conversation for those who wish to. So with that, thank you. I wish you all peace, and I hope you have a marvelous conference experience, and you get what you need from this conference and what the universe deems that you need. So with that, I wish you a good day, good evening, wherever you may happen to be in the world. So with that, take care, and I'll be seeing you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.